So I don't have any expertise on accountability, which is what the topic of this speech is. But I do have 2.5 years of deep and ongoing reflection about what it is to be accountable, who gets held to accountability, individuals, institutions, and what is it actually to show up as accountable. I read a quote, I'm a huge quote collector, which will show up a little bit today. I read a quote about 6 months ago. And the quote, I didn't write it down because I rejected it. So I can't even attribute where I encountered it. But it stuck with me. It is that we can't hold others accountable. We can only hold ourselves accountable. And I rejected it because I have been endeavoring to hold the system of harm and the individuals who cause me harm accountable. You know, fast forward 2.5 years, and I'm going to break that down a little bit. Personal accountability, I'm all over it. Yes, we can hold ourselves accountable, and we must hold ourselves accountable. And I think that is actually one of the reasons why I chose Buddhism, because you're sitting on a cushion with only yourself. Your thoughts, your feelings, your energy, there's no one to blame, it is you. You're accountable for your experience. Enter into Buddhist institutions, and I just sort of extrapolated from there. Like, what a great place of accountability. All these people sitting courageously on a cushion holding themselves accountable. Not to mention the leaders who devoted their lives to the vows of non-harming, of ending the suffering for all sentient beings. Places of accountability. So I thought. Places, in Googling my center and centers like it, where Buddhist practice is institutionalized, you read things like, we will honor and protect those who come here, seeking the teachings of liberation. So when I actually was confronted with an assault during retreat, I wouldn't say it shocked me that the individual who assaulted me didn't hold himself accountable. You know, we're in practice, right? Like, it's a practice. He acknowledged it, that he did what he did, it was witnessed, but he didn't hold himself accountable for it, so he was unwilling to make repair or an apology. What shocked me was the abbot of the retreat center, who was also my spiritual teacher, who did not act on the explicit message they send the world around accountability, so that the abbot didn't hold that person accountable either. What I also didn't get from the abbot in the first month after the assault, or the 4 months after that, where I stayed practicing, is I didn't even get acknowledgement. And if you look at the South African Truth and Reconciliation Committee definition, acknowledgement is an affirmation that a person's pain is real and worthy of attention. And it's central to the victim's restoration of dignity. So if you'll indulge me a minute, I am accountable to the law, so I want to name for you lawyers and others. I recorded a conversation I had over Zoom with the abbot a month after the assault happened, after I had been treated in various ways that were harmful. And I recorded it because I felt crazy asking for accountability. I felt crazy, like, what am I missing here as a human who was harmed in this space? And so I just brought a sample of one of the things he said at the end of our conversation that I just would like to sit with you and have you experience.
The hardest part of this, it's the hardest part of our lives, is trying to live our vows and to honor, in this case, both of you, because the vows of several sentient beings includes both of you. And knowing that you're different people, the harm that is done that is different, you know. now. And within a constantly moving spin.
And that word was help. I don't know if you could hear that word help. He said help. So I don't know what you hear with that from having been part of the conversation prior to his statement where I was talking about the harm that happened to me, how I experienced it, his involvement as a teacher around it afterwards. Being like, where are you in this? Every conversation was about kind of a little mini teaching, you know, the dHARMa, saving all sentient beings, and treating both people, we're here to care for both of you. Always I was met with that, and always I was met with how hard it is for him and them as monastics holding the space. Never an acknowledgement of me and what I suffered. That was a month after the incident happened. Now, another quote from Truth and Repair, which is an amazing book by dHARMa, from everything from personal injury to, South Africa. Victims don't just want recognition of their suffering, acknowledgement. They want the harmful actions to cease and for accountability to be established. I continued to practice in the center, and I continued to receive oppression in my practice, being asked to remove myself. It's all in the story that I told in the speech earlier. But I realized that the individual man who assaulted me and the individual teacher abbot were not going to be able to hold themselves accountable. So the institution, the Zen Center, they had an ethics committee, they had a grievance process. It was the only place I could turn as I was suffering consequences. If anyone's read Audre Lorde, you probably know the saying, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, which is basically saying you can't use the institution to fix the institution. So the ethics committee serves at the pleasure of the president, the abbot. So they're elevated by him, they're trained by him. So my expectations were pretty low, but it was the only path I had if I wanted to practice. And they were right to be low. It was damaging in many ways for somewhat similar reasons. But what they did do, the ethics committee made recommendations 6 months after the original harm. They did acknowledge the harm of both the individual and of the abbot. They acknowledged the patriarchy and systemic racism and sexism that infused the institution, and the pattern of harm where men's needs were centered and prioritized over women's. So, that felt good. That was good. I liked that. But was it accountability? The same author in a different book says true accountability requires profound institutional changes that would prevent a repetition of these harms. And that mattered to me. My harm happened because I was trying to protect a young woman. I wanted to protect more young women, and I wanted to protect the bystanders to motivate them to report the harm so that change could happen. The ethics committee in the organization, they made actually good recommendations for the individual student. They had strict rules of things he had to do in order to practice there. And with the abbot, there were 6 recommendations that were a little bit more general, a little bit more broad brushstrokes. Okay, I don't know, was accountability going to happen? I left the monastery, didn't practice. It was time to leave. And then a year ago, which was about a year after the harm, I wanted to know, did they actually act? Was there accountability on at least the recommendations made? At least that. Did my suffering matter? Did my efforts matter? So I emailed them and got a quick response back. Well, not quick actually, but I got a response back that said, we have no information, your case is closed. I was like, but you've been telling me it's my case. Like what's happening with my case? So I have a friend who's a lawyer who also is familiar with the Zen Center, and I had that lawyer write a letter from my solicitor requesting follow-up on the recommendations. We did get a response, detailed about the meticulousness with which they followed the recommendations for the individual student. Nothing about the abbot. It was erasure. I was like, wow, nothing. No mention of him. He was the center of the case for me. Accountability. Then I read this. Aha. In order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. Secrecy and silence are the perpetrator's first line of defense. And the more powerful the perpetrator, the greater his prerogative to name and define reality, and the more completely his arguments prevail. And I want to make clear, I don't think this abbot is a malicious person, but I do think he is a person in power who has the ability to create forgetting in the institution. So a woman in her 50s, just beware everyone, a woman in her 50s doesn't take fault to erasure on the whole, right? Like, I wasn't okay, I was gone, I didn't want to be erased. I didn't want my experience to be erased. So I had one other tactic, which was to go to an umbrella organization called the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, which is an optional organization. The abbot of my center is a member, and they have redone the most meticulous that I know of code of conduct, ethical code of conduct for members. So I filed a complaint a year ago. Code of conduct, boom. And just last March, they did an investigation just last March. Lo and behold, they found him to be in violation of their code of ethics, and two things to do with integrity. One of which related to his behavior to me as a practice student, one of which was misuse of his authority as a Zen teacher. So that was pretty great, more acknowledgement, right? And they made recommendations. One of the recommendations I asked for, or one of the sanctions, should they find me to be making a valid complaint, was an apology. You know, I actually, when I sent this in a year ago, I actually wasn't so sure that I had the capacity to hold this teacher and this center accountable. So I didn't go to them. They're a membership organization. They have no teeth. Whatever their sanctions are, there's no teeth to it. They can't enforce it. But what they did do is they demonstrated that my suffering of harm was not erased. An outside organization that is respected by that Zen teacher and his community saw it and actually named it, which is good, right? Like, I like to think at some point critical mass of people speaking out, making reports, a critical mass will lead to personal accountability, and that the personal accountability will lead to institutional accountability. But I also, in that recording, where I was in all the interactions where I was like, where are you? We're not like, can you come down? It's as simple as an apology. And then, you know, I found a good quote for apology. To offer a serious apology, you need the inner strength to allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you'll indulge me a minute, I'd like to play that recording of this abbot and my former spiritual teacher again. Because when I listen to it now, when I re-listen to it to prepare this speech, I actually heard it differently. Like, what is the obstacle in that very human person to acknowledgement and to apology? So again, if you'll indulge me, listen with me.
It's the hardest part of this. It's the hardest part of our lives is trying to live our vows and to honor, in this case, both of them, because the vow disabled sentient beings includes both of them. And knowing that you're different people, the harm that is done that is different, you know. And the consequences have to be different, and how to hold all of that, and at the same time trying, you know, within a constantly moving stream.
answers that quote, may I find it again and know who to credit it with? Absolutely. We are responsible for holding ourselves accountable. And he alone is responsible for holding himself accountable. And I am so glad to have pursued acknowledgement in several places so that more and more the people who have the power, who can rewrite the story, who can create forgetting, can't forget. And people can stop being harmed.